Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope you're all having a beautiful holiday season. Prepare to be inspired by a force of nature in entrepreneurship and women's health. She is a serial visionary who has built, scaled, and transformed businesses across 2 continents and an extraordinary range of industries, from CPG and retail to FinTech, RegTech, MedTech, healthcare, pharmacy, restaurants, manufacturing, distribution, and now boldly pioneering into Sextech. With unrelenting passion, she turns dreams into thriving realities, adapting, innovating, and leading with integrity every step of the way. Her superpower? Pairing razor sharp business development acumen with an infectious positive spirit that restores balance, common sense, and heart to everything she touches. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Tanya Griffin. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, George. Wow. That was quite the intro. I appreciate it.
I'm stoked you're here. Like, you have been crushing. We've been talking on these back channel forums for a while. And of course, our work has been intersecting here and there. And so the conversation's long overdue.
That's right. I agree.
Man, before we got started, we were warming up and we were talking about poetry, and you were giving me some awesome compliments on my poetry.
I
was. Thank you. Thank you. And I wish I could take 100% all credit for the poetry. But for everybody listening, checking out my poems, I got to tell you, they are inspired by me. I am merely the trembling hand, and I use AI to clean up all of my stuff out there. And I highly recommend everybody do it. You should be using AI and these tools to create the very best versions of yourself. So
don't be afraid, my friends. They're not coming to get you.
They're really not. They're really not. How have you been using AI these days, Tanya? I know that
as a tool, and we'll get into WeFlowyo, but when you start building tech stacks and MedTech and all that kind of stuff, if you don't use AI, you don't have a product, you don't have a tool. So it's short-sighted to say that we can be Luddites and sort of bury our head in the ground and not participate in this technology, for sure. I think.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I was talking to someone last week and we were talking about AI, and people were talking about all the videos they're watching and consuming all this stuff. But I really think, Tanya, the answer to consuming is creating. And these tools are so powerful. No matter what you're building, like, you have these tools at your disposal where you have the same technology that a Fortune 500 had, 5 years ago. There's really no limits to what you can create out there.
Well, I think that's a great point, George. I mean, it makes us singularly more powerful. So if we can compete with those big guys, I do toggle between making sure I maintain my authentic self and my, tone, my voice. But yourself, AI can mimic that tone. So we just haven't really, I'm still learning. I am not an expert in AI yet, but I know that I need to be. Right? Yeah. Not that expert's a big, strong word. I'm still trying to grapple with how to use it as a tool, which is what we're talking about. I don't want my voice overrun, but I certainly want to lean on time-saving solutions like AI. It would be silly not to. Short-sighted.
Yeah. Well, I think you're an expert, like, in experience. And I think that's where people
can old, George.
I see you over there.
That's my age.
See you at the No Kings protest with the sign. I see you out there living your life.
Oh yeah. I'm shameless in the sense that I'm not going to hold my voice back. And I do have decades now under my belt. So for that, yes.
When I think of authenticity, like, I think that, especially with AI, I think the spoken word, like what we're doing today, like, that's a real form of the authentic way in which you can't hide. Like, the way you express yourself, dancing, being out in the street, getting to use the spoken word, going to these different places, like building these things together. I think that is the way in which we can really breed our authenticity out there. And it seems like you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. First restaurant when I was 30 years, maybe 30 plus years. I've been doing it for a minute. I have.
You have. Crushing.
Yes.
So 30, is that how you got started, Tanya? You started in the restaurant business?
Well, when I'm the oldest of 10 kids. So, I grew up just dirt poor.
Yeah.
Half the time the lights were being turned off. So from a very young age, I started waiting tables. By 15, I was lying about my age and waiting tables. I love waiting tables. And so, fast forward at 5 years doing that, you end up in the right position to, it was a turnkey. My first restaurant was a turnkey. I took it over for a Lebanese restaurant this is in the 90s. Remember in the 90s in
Yeah.
Lebanon and AIDS, everything was
Yep.
just a mess in the 90s. So I was in the right place at the right time. And then I ended up opening a falafel market on St. Lucia's campus. And then I, had my first child, and the restaurant business is
Ooh.
hard when you're popping out babies. So that's when I started Kangaroo Kids. Yeah. So, but the restaurants, that was my first entrepreneurial sort of dance, I shall call it.
Man. How old were you when you had your first kid?
I was 27, I think. 1995. I had Sam in 95. I was born in 1968.
All right.
Somebody out there's got to do the math. I'm not that
Ah.
good. But those are the raw numbers to I think I was around 26 or 27. Something in there.
I think I was 37. I think I was
Oh, were you
37 when I had,
good? You knew what
yeah.
you were doing at that point. I like it.
Yeah. I that's what I tell myself. I tell myself I know what I'm doing, but there's so much uncertainty out there. And how much does the world change when you have kids? Like all of a sudden, like you're given this whole new window into like, whoa, what's going on over here?
It changes, and again, I my world when you're the oldest of 10 kids, I would argue you have minions, of course. But if that's in the world of I was changing cloth diapers, dunking them in the toilet from the time I was, 8, 9. So that was just so much a part of my world. And then I transitioned directly into marriage. I'm, Irish Catholic. You don't fuck before you marry. I didn't know the difference. So I married, first one was an Irish poet. Learn your trade. That means I supported them financially, of course. That's why when I saw your poetry coming at me, I was like, is he a working poet? What's going on? What's George up to over there? Yeah, I had my stint with the poet. And then the next stop was a guitar player. So what do you do?
Man, you are sex, drugs, and rock and roll from the beginning.
Yeah, through and through, baby.
Do you feel like sometimes I feel like we're in the midst of that transition again? I grew up like a Gen Xer, so I didn't catch the 60s too much, but I was a huge fan of them, like all like the Ginsberg and like the music that came out of there and the Weather Underground, like all this turmoil. Like, yeah, these guys are doing it.
Well, George, of course, I don't know what your collective Spotify age was, but mine was 74. Like that, I live in that space of, I would get down with Mick Jagger in a heartbeat. So I mean, it just depends on where your music vibe lies. But mine is certainly pretty set in the mid 60s, I would say.
Yeah.
Sure. Pushing up a little into the 70s, but mid 60s, late 60s is the sweet spot for sure.
Do you feel like we're coming back to that? Like when I spend all this time in the psychedelic world and like I go to some of these places and I'm like, oh, I can see it right here. Like maybe that's why I'm drawn to it, but I kind of feel like we're on the cusp of this creative explosion. Am I being too optimistic?
Oh gosh, I hope not. I kind of live in counterculture myself,
Yeah.
and if you saw my house, if I gave you the full 360, you would see just everything is mid-century. So you would have thought you had walked into the 1960s if you're in my home for sure, and everything I wear. So I have revisited and decided not to leave.
Yeah.
I know I don't want to go back to the 80s and 90s. Remember that, George?
Mm,
Oh, come on. We don't want to
yeah.
go back to the big hair, and some of that music was good, but I'm sticking with the 60s.
Yeah, man. I'm not there's a great book called Back to the 80s. And in that
Oh,
book they talk about how like that's when propaganda really started kind of folding out, and you start
Remember
looking
the
at all these.
subliminal messaging? That was
Oh
all
yeah,
in the 80s.
I do.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you and I we're probably about the same age, so we were just, you know, coming out of high school. So it was kind of our jam, but it was a
Yeah,
punk scene, like the Dead Kennedys. Like it was changing a lot. It was big hair
yeah,
and
yeah.
confused disco. Like where were we in the 80s? It was a rough spin for sure.
Do you feel like I kind of feel like I want to be an agent of bringing back this counterculture. And I see all
Yeah.
the things you're doing. I think that's why we align so much. I'm like, Tanya gets it. Like she is like a midwife of this new counterculture.
Wow, that's quite the I hope we're going back. I mean, if we look at like, 1967, of course, that was the summer of love. And it went
Yeah.
bad. It started to turn by
Right.
the time right about when I was born, it started to turn, but there was something beautiful and poetic about, you know, dial in, drop in, tune out, all of
Yeah.
everything where we had some respect for the classical psychedelics, LSD.
Yeah.
Psilocybin even took a back seat to LSD
Yep.
back in you brought up Ginsburg and and those guys. I mean, I certainly appreciate that time period, counterculture, and the confrontation it created against the status quo. And I think there's an energy right now in the world that says we've had it. We don't want this
Yeah.
anymore. We're going to fight a little bit.
Yeah.
I
I
want to
see it.
fight.
I know. Me
I'm
too.
ready to fight.
I get excited. Like I'll drive my daughter to school and there's all these people on bridges holding signs, and,
Yeah,
and for me, it's not even so much about like what the sign says. It's just people in the streets that have had enough. And I'm like, look at
that's
these
right.
people, man. I got to get out there. Look at these guys.
Well, I think for a minute, we can use LinkedIn because I think
Yeah.
some people have jumped on through LinkedIn. You know, um, Recently I've seen a change where you can speak your voice, you can speak out against certain things, but early on, even at the beginning of the year, let's say, there
Yeah.
was a fear out there. It was palpable. You could feel it that individuals were not speaking up, and that's kind of changing. And I think we need more of it because collectively we're a force.
Yeah.
If the one percenters and a fraction of the one percenters are really what's controlling the dialogue and how we operate, do not stand a chance if we stand together and have a voice. And you're bringing that to the forefront, not only with your poetry. So let's
Well,
go. I think we have to stand up and stop being living in fear and shame.
yeah.
We know collectively, those of us who dig into sex and drugs and even rock and roll, we know collectively that prohibition and fear mongering and stigma and shame were counterproductive. So much so that they were absolutely dangerous to our young people. It incarcerated whole groups of people. I mean, all of this we all know uh, who are listening here, but we've had enough. This is enough. We got to push it back now.
You've written quite a bit on shame. When I was looking through some of the newsletter, like I've seen a few different articles on there. Like maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. Like it's a really powerful force in our world and in our families and in our communities.
Yeah, and I agree. I do. Um, if I have any soapbox, George,
Yeah.
it is pushing back on shame and stigma. And yes, around drugs and the egg in the frying pan and dare,
Mhm.
all of those things that were so relevant to us growing up. I mean, let's talk about shame in our generation versus the new kids that,
Yeah.
Gen Z. We grew up in a lot of religion, whether it was Catholicism or any kind of Christianity, which had opinions on how and when we had sex, on abstinence. It terrified us. around drugs and put all of our drugs into one bucket. Very, very dangerous. Not to allow discourse and education to shine through. It's super dangerous to our children that we have no differentiation between cannabis and heroin, cannabis and fentanyl, psilocybin and fentanyl. So that is dangerous, and I think we need to stop that from happening. And part of that is to have discourse about it. The reason I'm so forthright, maybe that's the word, I don't know, about having sex every day or talking about sex and talking about using drugs is I have multiple companies. I have 6 kids. I have grandkids. I do prioritize having sex every day. I double down on the weekends, of course, but at least during the week, I make sure that's a priority. And if I don't talk about it and make it normal for others, how can others feel at ease in that space? They're going to bring forth, the don't have sex till you're married. By the way, till you're married, terrible idea. I tried that. Couldn't have been a worse idea. Of course, I proselytize to my children your children, George, as you know, will generally, it's the whole concept of reverse psychology, right? They will do the opposite of what you say. So of course I was always about, go explore, fuck everyone, boys, girls, go, just dig in and have fun and learn. And of course they didn't. Having my boys, they're both married, super monogamous children. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, if you want your kids to not do what you do, be a leader in that space. No, that's unfair to say, and then they do that. But I do think that we have an obligation. I personally have decided that in this space of shame, I am fearless. And if I don't get out there and, I have a sex brand where it gives me a platform to go talk to others about, something as simple as oral sex. When I first started this a decade ago, I'd speak to groups and I'd get this fear around oral sex, or I don't like it. And I would say, why? Let's talk about it. And of course, even the most prudent of individuals perk up, they listen, they're no longer a deer in headlights. People are interested in these things, whether it's sex or drugs or, how we take in media, all of these things. We're better off discussing them with each other, I think.
What kind of pushback do you get? Like, I would imagine that there's tons of people that talk about, like, wait, what if they're not ready? What if they make a mistake? Or, what do you do when you get that kind of pushback?
There's always pushback. And my instinct when I get that fear and shame is to lean in. You know what I mean? I breastfed my kids like an African woman. Kangaroo Kids was basically a resale and maternity support center. And I'd always get this, I'd be nursing one of the kids and I would get all of this resistance. How can you do that? That's, and just the shame just emanating from someone. And so even back then I said, I may be done when they hit prom. So what I tend to do is lean into that shame with others and let them see that, maybe I am on the other extreme, meaning them. So again, until we talk about it, until we open dialogue, how do any of us face our shame?
Why do you think that there is so much shame? Like, it's interesting to think that a woman would be shamed for breastfeeding in public,
Oh, listen,
it's crazy to think about.
Shame for breastfeeding. Women are shamed for our sexuality. So let's be real about what it means to be feminine and female, and that it is scary for others who aren't at ease with themselves to watch open sexuality or breastfeeding, any of these very natural things, these very feminine things. We collectively as the world, but we as religious institutions have worked very hard to not allow women to be authentic. So breastfeeding that should be the most base of things, right?
Yeah,
That
agreed.
is the most healthy way of getting your child, your offspring sustenance, and then take that to procreation. So in the wearing the religious hat, we are all about procreation. All of our religions are, go forth and procreate, but don't have sex. Like, I love confronting the hypocrisy and the contradictions there. I don't know what to say about that other than we are, I think, culturally terrified of female sexuality. And by extension, if anyone thinks that female sexuality is part of breastfeeding, that is just, we have so much work to do there, but we got to start somewhere, and that is confronting all of their puritanical views, which are not necessarily healthy. That's bringing it, that's not how we are as humans. As humans, we want to have sex with each other. It's pleasurable. As humans, we absolutely want to get high. Come on. I don't know which of us don't, but as someone who does get high, I can tell you, dialing that in and hitting that sweet spot consistently, that's a win. That's not something in my life I'm going to give up. And I hope others are as lucky as me to be able to find that.
I agree. I
Yeah.
really think there's something to be said about, experiencing life and all of its heights. I'm no stranger to different kinds of drug use, and everything I've done is on my podcast right here. I'm pretty open about it. But
Yeah.
let me play devil's advocate on this. I would love to get your
Yeah.
opinion on
Let's
here.
go.
What about the difference between open sexuality and like the porn industry? Because sometimes in the porn industry, you see like a lot of radical abuse. Like some of it's way out of control. Like there's a lot of violence,
Absolutely.
and then there's a lot of trafficking and stuff like that. How do we send out a clear message that like sex is okay, but hey, there's some lines we probably shouldn't cross? Like how do we delineate
Absolutely.
that?
That is such a good question. And here's what I want to bring AI into it to
Okay, let's do
talk
it.
about it. And let's talk about it in the framework of something like LinkedIn,
Okay.
which is where we, the older people, go and communicate and share, papers and ideas and stuff like that. So on LinkedIn, and I'm going to get to the porn issue.
Yeah, take your
So
time.
we can go all the way to fisting in porn, where it's extreme and it's abusive or pedophilia or any of those things. But then to the other side of the spectrum, we have shamed basic education and female sexuality. So why can't we differentiate between pedophilia and strangulation without moderation and all of these things that we know inherently? And I think AI can figure it out. If they can fix and upgrade your poetry,
Yep.
why can't we differentiate between what is educational, what is inherently authentic female sexuality, and pedophilia, to be the extreme
Yeah.
version of pornography?
Yep.
So I think that we have to stop letting the pendulum swing to the extremes and live in the nuance here for a minute, because we can't
Yeah.
push back on who we are as individuals because of the extremes. And I'm always concerned, George, about the slippery slope of censorship, right?
Yes.
So not that I'm with regard to pornography, if you want to know what I love a good Tito Brass. So this is I like the old school pornography. Yes, it has the male gaze, but these big breasted women and this beautiful photography. So I take my porn in snippets like that. And I'm going to argue, if you're having sex with a partner and you can lock down that media, your camera broadcast to your TV, make your own porn, my friends. That one's cleaned up. So I think, to answer your question, it sickens me to watch, to see that we're letting child pornography and some of these extreme, aggressive, abusive pornography take down what is good and authentic about male and female sensuality and sexuality. So we don't need to live in these extremes. We got to come back to a happy medium here and be able to speak freely. That would be my answer. I think.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, we are adults. Like, you know what is right and you know what is wrong. Like, it's just, I think that there's a money aspect to it too. It seems that, like you had mentioned, the extremes, like people gravitate towards the extremes. And even when you watch the news, like you're focused on the car crash, the same as you're focused on the fisting or something crazy like that. Like, you don't
Right.
have to be right there like that. And that shouldn't be like the be all. Like, you should, I don't know, that shouldn't be something that is, I don't know if I can think of the right word for it, but the mainstream of that aspect of the industry.
Well, here's where we have a problem, and
Okay.
I think I saw a reel on this. I can't remember your man who speaks on this, but I think it was a little reel with Oprah. But we used to, when we were growing up, it was sex sells, right? It was
Yeah.
always sex
Yep.
sells. That's what
Yep.
does it. But apparently, what sells now, outsells sex, is rage in our
Wow.
social media
Wow.
algorithms. So if you, and
Yeah.
that's a quick Google for everyone to go down the rabbit
Yep.
hole on that, but that's sad and depressing. I would prefer that we were selling sex
Yeah.
over rage. And if we look at the creator economy, I mean, let's talk about OnlyFans for a minute.
Yeah. Great
I
point.
mean, look,
Great
that was
point.
the highest revenue. I think they did 6 billion. So they beat out Zuckerberg and all these other
Yep. Yep.
yahoos. And this is a way for us to allow women and men to be creators, get the money themselves. So there is benefits to that. I'm on OnlyFans. I don't take my clothes off, but I share my articles because I
Yeah.
do have respect for platforms that allow an open dialogue and don't censor behavior, especially something that I, as a grown up, as an adult, feel that I should be able to communicate to you, George, a fellow adult, with no harm. So if we take it back to the base level, I am not hurting you, other humans, or myself. I mean, this is obviously a libertarian view that is deeply entrenched in my being. But if I'm not hurting you, please let me be. Let me have my drugs. Let me have my sex. Um, and I'll be a kinder person for it. I promise you. Right? Because when you
Yeah.
take those things away from me, and of course, I don't, I keep them at play in my life. I think I'd be pretty grumpy, George, if you took my sex and drugs. I might want to live in rage with the rest of these yahoos.
Yeah. There's such an interesting parallel between sex and drugs because everybody, at least I would say most people I know, have been to a party where someone took some drugs and they were way out of control. And then that ruins it for everybody. And
Right,
same thing with sex too. Like, all of a sudden when someone takes it turns into rape instead of like a pleasurable
right.
thing, or it turns into this thing. I think that on some level, it's not so much the sex or the drugs, it's the individual's inability to sort of bridge that gap. Maybe it's
Yeah,
their
to
own
put on the
personal
brakes.
trauma. Yeah.
Moderation. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's an IQ thing. Maybe it's a pain thing. I don't know. But like,
Do
that's
we
part of the
really want to
problem.
go
Like the
down the
bad
IQ
actors.
thing? Because you and I, we could do that, George.
I know. It might be. I don't know. I have no idea. I think it's probably trauma on some aspect,
I think
or
IQ weighs into it
okay, let's
as
hear it.
well. I think trauma is there. I think that self awareness is a big deal in the world, and of course, drugs used in moderation can
Yes.
certainly elevate self awareness on all, elevate your senses,
Yep.
awareness of yourself. They can hit your default mode. They can hit your ego. So there
Yep.
is value in those things. But if you take it too far to the other side, by contrast, you lose that self awareness. So there's something to be said about, you know, not obviously moderation. We should all be considerate of moderation, but dialing in that sweet spot. So microdosing when we're talking about these drugs, and doing things with intention where there is an objective. So when I do drugs, I do them with crazy intention. I track them. I know the application. I've been doing this for years. That's We Flow Yo, because I understand that I can get to a very exact, crazy, incredible place in terms of elevating my senses and self-awareness. And that connects with sex, obviously. That when you learn and you practice doing that, there's something very magical in that space once you've dialed it in.
Yeah. I remember being like a Gen Xer, and you would always hear about some of these crazy parties. You know what I mean? And it's a
Yeah.
great way. Like if you're gonna have some sort of party, it should probably be invite only. You know what I mean? Like that's what you see all these clubs.
You
Like,
mean
okay,
like
wait a
swinger
minute,
parties or like full-on
all of
Diddy
them.
parties? Which parties are we talking about?
I don't know that I'd want to go to a Diddy party. I think
No,
that
I
would
don't
be
think
out
he's
of
having any
control.
right now.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have to wait about 50 months.
He might be having some parties in prison. He might be the belle of the ball.
Maybe. That's right.
It's so crazy to think about all that aspects of that. What you had
Yeah.
brought up, Floyo, like what is going on over there? Like what is
Yeah, so
that
early
medium going to be?
stage. I've been working on this for a while now,
Okay.
George, but my interest, and I come out of a world that over the last 30 years, maybe the last really 20, that was hyper focused on MedTech. I built a solution
Mm,
called Connect with Docs that created a primary care solution that allowed you to do HIPAA compliant communication and lower the cost, and then got into RegTech and FinTech software in the cannabis space around banking. So that development phase and using tech to
yep.
make us better as humans has always been of interest to me. What I understand about drugs, and particularly drugs and flow states. So for
Okay.
me, let's define what a flow state is. Um, Absolutely, right up there at the top for me, orgasmic pleasure is a flow state, but so is my runner's high
Yep.
when I swim and I get into that single thought, just drop into that one moment. That is a flow state. When you write your poetry before AI steps up, that
Yeah.
is a flow state, right?
Totally.
So
Totally.
for me, a big part of this counterculture and getting back to, the world of LSD and dropping in and dialing in is being able to understand microdosing and dialing in these drugs and stacking these drugs. I mean, we can look at Paul Stamets, for example.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
he's a big fan of psilocybin, right? And he also believes in stacking these things. So whether that's niacin or lion's mane, when we look at these drugs, we need to understand the dosing. We need to understand the application, how we're tracking it. And I would argue, as important as any of those three, the contraindications. So, for example, psilocybin and LSD, they don't go great together. But did you know that? Whereas LSD stacked with MDMA, that's a good marriage if you do it correctly and
Right.
you get the dosing dialed in correctly. MDMA, for example, at the wrong dose is going to make you very sick no matter who you are. Its job is to turn your stomach and make you nauseous before you finally, get rolling. So I think that what we've lost in this demonizing and fear mongering around drugs is the safety and education around drugs. And so if we start encrypting, so obviously you
Yep.
don't want me to know what drugs you're using. However, if you're Grace Bless Wobley with Hero Hearts and you're running these studies, you would like to have that data, anonymous data, so that we start as a culture here having benchmarks around how to use those drugs. Now, you and I are in the psychedelics world, so we can go to
Yep.
wikipsychonaut.net, and that website keeps falling down, and we can kind of read through and figure out contraindications. But guess who doesn't? Guess who doesn't get good drugs? My kids. My kids get drugs because the drugs are everywhere. They're readily available. We all have access to drugs. But because we have chosen not to allow education and information about dosing to percolate,
Yeah.
and that we have access to, we've created a very dangerous situation. You're handed drugs at a party. So I because I preach on this, and preach is a big word. I think I'm going to pull it back. Even proselytize is a
There
big
you go.
word. But because it's my soapbox, years ago, I started a nonprofit called Save My Life. So, for example, what that does is I give out free Narcan, which is naloxone nasal spray. So, if you are at risk of an overdose, or you have taken a pill handed to you at a party and it happens to be laced with fentanyl, you could be dead. So we should all have Narcan with us. If we're at a party, it doesn't mean that you're a junkie. There should be no shame or stigma around that. But if we don't educate each other and speak openly about it, we're killing our kids, we're killing our family members, our neighbors, our loved ones. That is absolutely unacceptable because we've got a few right-wing, zealots who think that it's okay to withhold this information from each other. That's not okay. We need to be open about it. And we are doing drugs. We've never stopped doing drugs,
Yeah,
George.
I know.
They just bubble up into different cauldrons. That doesn't mean we've ever stopped doing them. We just change the way we shame them or
Yeah.
prohibit them, which we've done for 100 years. That's unacceptable.
It's out of control.
It's
And
out of control.
not only have we not stopped doing them, but we've glorified like the worst of them. Like I
Oh,
don't have any problem with alcohol. Like I've drinking so much in the past. It's ridiculous. It's out of control. However,
right.
in my older days, I'm like, man, I would rather do like an eighth, or I would rather do some micro dosing, or if I'm going to be home, you know what, I'll figure out some LSD or something like that. But to
Right.
think I'm going to go out and drink like a 7 Jack and Red Bulls, and
Right.
just be wrecked for 2 days. Like we
That's
run
right.
on alcohol and it's glorified. It's in the music. It's in the bar. It's
But
everywhere out there.
listen to George, here's what's so exciting to
Okay.
me
Let me hear.
about watching alcohol.
Okay.
Here's what we're watching from the data.
Okay.
Gen Z, which you got to always follow the younger
Of
generations. We're
course.
old people. But when you look to the younger generations to drive culture, Gen Z
Yep.
is ditching the alcohol. Furthermore, they're leaning, they of course they love the classical psychedelics.
Of
So
course.
MDMA, they're big fans of ketamine, obviously. But psilocybin, LSD, pink cocaine, these cosmetic drugs, these are their drugs. And they're not going to bars. They love social wellness
Yeah.
events. They love yoga and
Yep.
dance. And, the rest of us are going to follow suit. But the fact that alcohol is taking a back seat to even THC in our
Yep.
liquor stores right now, I know
Yep.
that's getting pulled back with the recent, big beautiful bill, and we want to separate D8, D9, D10 beverages, and that's something that we're going to have to navigate. But here's what we learned when those numbers hit the double digit billions overnight is that if there's a good alternative to alcohol, which you can't sleep well on it, it makes you
Yep.
mean and angry. I'm an Irish Catholic. So alcohol, George, has
Enough
just
said.
ripped through my family tree,
Yes.
like
Of course.
destroyed family members in
Yep.
such an aggressive way that as someone inside of that tragedy, you're like, yeah, 10 mix of LSD, that's not a bad solution,
Yep.
to a fifth of Jack and Red Bull,
You're right.
which I don't know which is worse. I don't know if it's the Jack Daniels or the sugar in the Red Bull. Which of those white powders are more devastating to individuals, right? So
Yeah.
I think we got to be smart and we got to see it's for me again, you brought it up, but it starts with stop shaming my sex and drugs. Let's
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah.
And when people get upset, and they do get very upset with me, when I speak this language, and how dare I think I lean in and confront them. I think, well, why do you think that the sugar and the alcohol is okay? Because those are just, that's killing humanity for sure. More than
Yeah.
the cannabis is. Cannabis just is not killing us.
Yeah. It's, you don't ever see the studies on that. Like those are kept quiet or they don't do them. But how many of the violent crimes are adjacent to alcohol? Like I would say the majority of them. Like you were just in the
Right.
wrong state of awareness. Like it puts you, much like psychedelics put you into a different state of awareness, so too does alcohol. And these other drugs put you in a lower state, like a lower vibration of awareness. So kind of a
That's right.
base level. You're doing all these base things. You're like, what are you doing? That's such a base level. We try to live up here and see the world a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, to be in line. Well, if you look at, if we look at the homeless crisis and the psychosis
Yes.
around,
Yep.
meth and
Yep.
what's happening
Oh,
with tranks and the
yep.
escalation even in fentanyl, you start to understand that yes, those are completely different vibrations. My
Yep.
little bit of LSD is very different
Yep.
than the psychosis put upon individuals. We give them homes and they rip them apart, not because
Yep.
they're bad individuals. These are not bad individuals. This is a drug that is putting you into psychosis. Alcohol, could be a
Yeah.
lesser version of that, but we always got to up our game as
Yep.
humans. So, and that includes when we're getting high. That's the danger, of course, in getting high is that people don't understand microdosing and how to dial in moderation. Because if you do, my goodness, can the world be perfect? My little bubble's perfect. I can tell you that. I have orchestrated, George, the most perfect of worlds. But it's because it's done with intention and deliberate.
Yeah. And like a big dose of self-love, which is the opposite of some of these other drugs. And I think
Absolutely.
it's
Yes.
happening. Like I talk to so many people in startups in the tech industry and psychedelics, and they're all using these the same way a functional person might use a cup of coffee. You know what I mean? And there's a coffee
Right.
machine in every break room, in every building, in every part of the
Yes.
world. Maybe there should be like a microdosing station at every building in every place somewhere.
That's right. Well, that's interesting. And of course, we come in, George, with so much fear around the classical
Yeah,
psychedelics, and let's just say LSD and psilocybin. Let's
right.
just use those two because we all of the fear mongering around the outliers. So if you're predisposed to psychosis or schizophrenia or
Right.
something that it can trigger, and for me, that is enough to say, I have a sex brand. Oh yes, and I do put cannabinoids in it, THC, CBD, CBG
Yeah.
terpenes. I'm okay with that. Where I'm not selling classical psychedelics. That's a choice that even that little margin of error is not okay with me. So on that side of the world, that's where Reflowio comes in. It's very important to me to educate people so that they can figure this out for themselves instead of just taking a pill at
Yeah.
a party and not understanding how to navigate that experience. That's where the danger lies, in my opinion. It's not that these drugs aren't good. I posted something the other day. I have 5 drugs I'm taking to my grave, and I'm going to tell you what they are.
Yes.
Obviously, right up there at the top of my list is caffeine, is coffee. Every day I have myself a cortado. We sold some, like a Wurlitzer and a Gibson amp and a little guitar and got a magnificent Italian espresso machine, right? Right off the boat from Italy,
Yes.
because that's a drug I want every day. I love that one. I'm
Yep.
an old lady, so I'm throwing topical estrogen and oral estrogen in that mix. I will die popping that pill. And let's see, what are my other drugs? Well, of course, silicone lube. I wouldn't go a day. I have vats of it in every room. I wouldn't go a day without silicone lube. And then my classical psychedelics are just crazy important to me. Did I forget a drug? Coffee, certainly lube, cannabis. Cannabis is an anti-inflammatory. It lets me just drop in and be chill. And that doesn't mean that I'm high all the time. I'm certainly not high now, not during working hours usually, but if I'm creating, if I'm in a yoga class, there's something wonderful about a 10 milligram gummy that lets it come up right in the middle of my hot yoga class. It's just me and my mat, baby. Like no one else exists, and that's okay. That's a good thing. But those are all done with intention. And drugs aren't bad, but let's not pretend that sugar isn't a drug. That these other drugs alcohol, these are all drugs that as a society we've embraced. We love a Snickers.
Yeah,
We're Jack Daniels and Five Bull all day long. So we got to get an even playing field and stop pretending that some of these drugs are worse than others. Let's discuss them all and put them out in the open.
I love it. I love it. You know what? If I bring it back to the idea of counterculture,
Yeah.
and the idea of, you spoke about how Floyo and some of the tests you're developing allow the individual to be responsible by understanding what dose is right for them, how it makes
Correct.
them feel, how it interacts in there. And I can't help but think maybe part of the reason for this just say no that we grow up in, or the abstinence, is that these sort of drugs raise your awareness and they break down boundaries. They allow you to see, like, wait a minute, this is fucking bullshit. This right here, this is bullshit. I'm not going to do
Right.
this anymore.
Right.
So you think that maybe like that's part of the reason for, maybe this pullback on cannabis is like the alcohol industry saying like, hey, whoa, our numbers are way down. We need to get back to this. Or maybe even some people if you look at the people out on the streets right now, maybe the last thing they want is a populace becoming self-aware of all the bullshit around them. Do you think that that's part of this sort of medical container and this sort of pushback?
How could we not think that? Knowledge is power. So when we empower others to be
Yes.
self-aware and self-actualize, that is dangerous. I am dangerous.
You
I'm
are.
annoying to people. I'm out there screaming, why are you so afraid of LSD?
Yeah.
Even to say the word upsets people, the word
Yep.
LSD. So when we open that dialogue and we pull apart what scares you, then it doesn't scare you anymore.
Right.
Now what we have? Now we have individuals who are blowing open neuroplasticity.
Yep.
I posted on LinkedIn, George, the other day. This is mind-blowing, and I'm bringing it up because it's so fascinating. They discovered, what they did is they took the rabies virus, which is unbelievably aggressive with regard to neuroplasticity, and it basically works backwards in your brain. They took the rabies virus, this is in mice, and they reconfigured it and attached psilocybin to it. Psilocin. And they mapped, it was about, they lit it up with neon green. And then they spliced open these brains and they tracked 500,000 connections, neuroplastic connections. So we now know what is lighting up your brain, which parts of the brain are being lit up, very particularly by psilocin. What? That's so incredible. And it's such power that we can use about not only self-actualization and when you're out in nature and you've taken a magic mushroom and all of your senses have exploded and you're dropped into that moment, but trauma, memory, dementia, all of these things. So we have not allowed that research to happen because we're afraid. Come on. That's not fair to humanity. We got to stop. We got to do better as humans.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And it seems like so many of these ailments, so many of these labels that we put on ourselves, be it depression or anxiety, they come from a society that's fearful. It's almost like a contagion of a sick society is causing the dis-ease inside all of us. And psychedelics, you need only look at some of the anecdotal evidence, some of the brain scans, some of the work around the default mode network being turned off. Depression, veterans coming back, like it's healing so many people. It's allowing them to live a life worth living again.
George, absolutely. So there's all of that,
Yeah.
all of these things that we can use as treatments for, and I
Right.
don't want to call them disabilities, but if you're severely depressed, that's a
Yep.
disability. It's wrecked
Yeah.
your world. So there's all of these things that we can do better. We can do better than our SSRIs are doing now, and we
Yep.
need to open our minds and explore that. But let's go the other direction. So what happens when you are from a part where you're trying to really self-actualize? Like move the dial in the other direction. Be the poet, be
Yeah.
the musician, drop in as Paul McCartney and John Lennon. What do we do as humans when we're able to take this stuff to the next level? That also is something that at some point we have to acknowledge we're not only putting out fires here.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm all about sex and drugs and marrying those two because I gotta tell you, it's fucking awesome. It is awesome. Like if you guys can figure this out, those of you who are listening, and it takes a lot of practice. I mean, I've put in my 10,000 hours for sure. But if you make that a priority and really learn how to dial that in, life is good, my friend. It is good for sure. So there's that other
Yeah.
place too, where we're just next level, um, taking it to the next level, essentially.
100%. 100%. It's beyond the medical container. You know what I mean by
Right.
that? Like,
That's what I wanted to you said it better than I did. We get hung up, like when I was doing the cannabis fight 15 years ago, we'd go into these,
yeah.
we'd go into these little municipalities trying to get a medical dispensary in, and all the NIMBYs would come out, and I'd be wheeling in the epileptic kids and the PTSD, because there were certain words that we could
Yeah.
use. We could talk about veterans. So I'd have all my
Right.
veterans, and I'd bring in my kids with epilepsy, and all I could talk about was cannabis is going to help this medical condition, knowing that it's a much better drug to alcohol, that I'm protecting my children from drinking and driving and doing stupid things around other drugs that aren't as safe. But I can't say that because as soon as I bring up getting high as humans, that is just, I am crazy chick over here, trying to convince people to get high, which nothing could be further from the point. We as humans, we relish an escape. It's not like we don't binge television
Yeah.
or sugar or all of these things. So we're looking for places to drop out. Let's make it safe and talk about it. It's not that we're not doing it.
Yeah. All these ideas of escape, like, what if you could escape into your own life that's beautiful?
Mm,
We need to be doing more of that, right? Like
I
the
do it.
reason I know, here,
Yeah,
it
I
takes
do
one to know
that.
one, right?
Right. But it's about time too. And as soon
Of
as you
course.
start leaning into that presence and valuing time in that way, and that includes, using tools like maybe
Yep.
cannabis or
Yeah.
classical psychedelics to drop in and doing it with intention, it is you really don't want to give that time back necessarily. And it does make you incredibly creative in this sense. I'll tell you where
Yeah.
it affects productivity and creativity. Time, as you know, because we both use classical psychedelics and we both understand what happens to time. It slows.
Yep.
So you're in this present moment and you're thinking of one thought, which is a big accomplishment, George. To bring one
Yeah.
thought through is magical in terms of what you can accomplish. I get most of my work done, on the yoga mat, swimming, in a runner's high. I jump out of that and I'm thinking or solving that problem. And then, of course, I use my technology, my AI. I hit my notes, I write
Yep.
it down, I send it to the team. But there's a reason why Steve Jobs, there's a reason why all the tech guys aren't afraid of psychedelics, because they too understand that there is this space that you can drop into that accelerates creativity. It accelerates your senses. Now, a hero's dose means that you have dropped out of that, that presence. That is the other side of things. But if you learn how to use it with intention and with, some degree of strategy, meaning you know where you're going every time. George, that's why I choose LSD, for example, over magic mushrooms. Because one takes me for a ride, and the
Yeah,
other, I can dial it in such a way that I know right where I'm going. Right, that and it's all about dosing and practice, in my opinion. Hence, we
yeah,
flow you, right? It's teaching others to kind of practice this and get better and better at it without the stigma.
yeah. So much like that word stigma is, it's interesting to think about. That's where the anxiety comes from. Hey, I'm doing
Yeah,
something society says I shouldn't do it. Even
right.
though you could be doing something totally innocent that may not even be wrong, but because society looks down upon it, all of a sudden you feel this weird pressure in your life. Like, oh no, what's someone going to think about me? Oh no, I can't believe I'm doing, what would they think? Like, who
Right.
cares? Who cares what they think? How do you feel right now? How are your
George, on a
relationships
lot
right
of
now?
drugs to speak those words.
You know this.
There's a
I've had
reason why
all
you
of them.
speak that
I
language.
know.
Right? Because we have blown open all of that
Yes.
shame around us
Yeah.
because we have practiced dropping into that
Yeah.
space, which you couldn't deny is healthy. When we live in shame, whether it's religion just
Right.
just pushing us down, or sexism or racism or
Yep.
classism, those are things designed
Yep.
to push us down and help make us live in shame. If
Yeah.
we can break free of that, we will be better as humanity. Obviously, it's not
Yeah.
healthy for us to live in shame.
Yeah, that's so well said. It's been a while since I thought about those particular modalities as not a bug, but a feature.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like those are a total feature in
right.
society. Again, more drug use that you come to these incredible conclusions like, oh, that's not a bug, it's a
Whoa.
feature.
But George, here's something interesting about
Okay.
moderate drug use, in my
Okay.
opinion. So
Okay.
I part of this is about that discussion we had about the new study that where we are tracking
Right.
neuroplasticity.
Okay.
So we know that when we hit our brains with either any of the classical psychedelics, psilocybin or LSD, for
Right.
example, that we're triggering those 2A serotonin receptors, and we're blowing open neuroplasticity, sometimes temporarily, but
Right.
also we're formulating new connections. That is so good for us,
Yeah.
George. And if we learn to work in that space and practice. So for example, I, use my drugs strategically to do very
Nice.
particular things. And a lot of it is on the weekends, starting on a Thursday is when I double down into my sex and drugs bubble.
Nice.
It's around that. But because I have so much practice, years of practice at this, when I go into my yoga mat in the mornings, before whatever time that is during the day, when I drop out of work, hit the mat, I can go to that same place. That's because my muscle memory and that
Yeah.
neuroplasticity is already open. So I don't need drugs. I can use breathing to get
Yep.
there. I can use, mantras to get there. So part of this is we need to be practicing how to get to that self-actualized space. And it's not always with drugs. I certainly don't use
Yeah.
drugs to get there all the time. Now, when I do, I enjoy them 100%. I have no problem with them, but I don't need them every time, for sure.
I think that should be part of the education,
It
for so
should.
long. Like we think, oh, you're a drug addict. Maybe you're just learning how to see the world differently because you're right. Once you build the pathways, you don't
That's right.
necessarily need them to get there. I think it was Alan Watts who said, once you get the message, you can hang
That's
up the
right.
phone. Once you've made those connections, we know this from studying memory. Once you establish a memory, that memory becomes cleaner and more vivid, and you can go back and be in that space. The same thing with these new neural connections, right? The more you use whatever it is. For me, it's usually LSD or mushrooms. But once you've figured out a way to process information in different parts of the brain, you don't necessarily need the stimulant or the bridge to get there. You already have it. Now you can get back to
Right.
that spot. That should be
Well,
all in
that's
the education.
well, it absolutely should. I'm trying to
Right.
do that
You're
with
doing a
Bohio.
phenomenal job.
It is. Well, and remember, George, you and I both know this because we've been practicing.
Yes,
But
without a
once
doubt.
you've gone to that space,
Yeah.
your mind can get there without it. I mean, you can see for
Yeah.
example, visuals. So
Yeah.
even if I'm not using LSD and I'm in a place where I can close my eyes and do it, the visuals that you get on
Yeah.
classical psychedelics, that vividness, your brain can still take you there without the tool.
Right.
But it's muscle memory and it's learning how to go to that place. And the only way I think that you and I get there so easily is practice in listening and knowing how to revisit, that same space again and again. And it's exercising. I don't know this. I'm not a
Yeah.
neuroscientist. I wish I kind of was. I love that space, but understanding and sitting in that dance of neuroplasticity, the fact that we are not stimulating these connections and that we are capable of it is sad for many people that have to live in a box where their brain isn't firing as rapidly as your and I brains fire. Because you know what that feels like. You know how quick you think,
Yeah.
how productive you are with or
Yeah.
without AI, my
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
So
It's a
that's, yeah.
I see it as a radical upgrade in pattern recognition. Sometimes you get these visuals and you see these incredible geometric images, and you're like, what is that? But
Right.
later in life, all of a sudden you realize, there's this thing I do in my relationship that's very not constructive. Who am I
Right.
fighting with? But then all of a sudden you see it in someone else's relationship. And it's like, once what it is? It's like getting a new car or a new shirt. Like once you get it, all of a sudden you see it on everybody else. Hey, they got the
Right.
same shirt.
What's so
Hey, they
true
got the
about
same
that?
car.
Yes.
So I
Yeah,
think
there
it's
is
a radical
there is
form.
that common bond that we
Yeah.
feel between each other, and I hope the more we get to talk about it
Yeah.
as humans, the more we will advance in these practices that are indeed healthy.
Yeah. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I
Yeah.
got a couple questions stacking up for you over here,
Whoa.
Tanya. Are you
Let's
ready?
go. I'm
Okay.
ready.
This one comes to my friend from Maya. What's up, Maya? Maya's coming from Brooklyn, and she says, Tanya, you've scaled businesses in some of the most regulated industries on earth. What inner compass do you rely on when the rules haven't caught up to human truth, especially in women's health and sex tech?
Whoa, Maya, thank you. Great question. Here's why I like highly regulated space.
Okay.
It's because other people are afraid of it. So I got into the cannabis industry in 2011 and I didn't know what I was doing, but I cold called the biggest players in Denver, Colorado, where I now live. I ended up building the first vertically integrated national cannabis franchise and having good exits, but it's because I knew that I could solve that problem because everything is just a widget. So as long as you can, work within the rules, and I love an industry, and this applies to sex tech as well because we've shamed it so vigorously. So there's so much opportunity, in my opinion, in FinTech, in sex tech, and in the drug space because you're forced to work within a set of rules, or in the case of hemp and THC in the cannabis space, no rules. So if you're able to move and pivot's a big word in my world. So when I build companies, and I own the companies that we've talked about, I own them myself. So I don't answer to a set of investors. That probably needs to change in the near future for me to scale these things. But the point is, in a fledgling industry where we've got so much regulatory change moving at all times, that ability to pull back and pivot makes you nimble and agile and lets you, pace yourself ahead of others who are stuck, who can't think outside the box. So I love those industries. And of course, sex and drugs came naturally to me. Once I figured out how great they were, of course, that's what I was going to go sell. That was a no-brainer. I joke, George, that I've gone from colostrum, which is of course my kangaroo kids. I'm a lactation consultant back 30 years ago and did that for years and years and years. so colostrum to cannabis to come, because that is the journey of my life. And I think I'm going to have to end on orgasmic pleasure, right?
That's so awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Maya. I got Daniel coming over here. Daniel coming out of Austin, Texas. What's up, Daniel? Thanks for being here.
Austin's a great place.
Man. He says, how do you convince investors to take seriously markets built around intimacy, pleasure, and embodiment without diluting their depth or power?
Interesting. It's tough, Daniel, because it is, because which is why I am
Yeah.
to date, self-funded. What I did very strategically is I have two CPG brands. Oh Yes, which is an ecstatic sex lifestyle brand, and Honey. And because the cannabis industry, I put cannabinoids, both CBD, CBG, and THC, into these products, and they sell in dispensaries and direct to consumer. So all that being said, that's very difficult to get investors for. Not only is it a volatile industry that could go away tomorrow. So one of the strategies I've had is to stay lean, run it like a mom and pop, grow it with just a lot of authenticity. And then when it's ready to pop, whether, in my case, it's not an exit right now, but it's bringing on strategic partnerships, you're ready to grow aggressively. Like I entered this space back in 2017 through 19, there was interest in cannabis and sex.
Yeah.
And some of the bigger VCs did throw money, 6 to say 12 million at different companies like this. And they've all not made it. They all went belly up because they spent too much money too fast, and they didn't let it grow organically, and weren't able, because they had a C-suite that was top heavy, to pivot. So I think there is growth. If you want to start a company in this space, I've always spent 30 minutes with anyone if you need some help. But don't get too big for your britches. The only way investors invest in this stuff is you need some sort of track record, which is a cart before the horse situation that is very, very hard to attain. They want to see these aggressive sales. They want to see revenue in an industry that is always holding you back. On the sex side, whoa, is it tricky? Because in the sex side, what's happened is sex and drugs, but I would say the sex side is even more problematic, because what used to be even 5 years ago, even pre-COVID, influencers, social media, you could build yourself up organically, have a good message, and let that disseminate through social media platforms. That has really, really changed. So the way you have to do it now is it's everything is a pay to play.
Yep.
So whether the ROI is digital marketing or buying off an influencer, if you don't have money to acquire that customer, let's say anywhere from $10 to $25 in the sex space, you're going to be it's going to be really hard to break through the noise. That's the biggest challenge. So when you go to your investors or potential VCs, you really are going to need a strategy and understand what it takes to acquire that customer. And then once you get them, you got to keep reselling them. So you've got a big lift, but guess what people do want? At least George and I wanted sex and drugs. So the Gen Z kids may not be having the same amount of sex that George and I are wishfully having, right? That has changed somewhat, but it's not that they don't want an orgasm. Like, we can meet them in this space for sure. It's tough. My answer to poor Daniel in Austin is it's a tricky space to raise money. Where I can raise money is tech. So when it comes to FinTech and Sextech, we flow you, even by really, this is about dialing in drug use. There is a space for that, because you are working with data and analytics and bringing people into your ecosystem before you push them back out into yoga classes or CPG brands. So you got to be really, none of this is easy, Daniel. And it is a particularly censored industry to raise money in. To answer your question, 100% is challenging.
Beautiful answer. What, Tanya, that it makes me curious. Do you see this world of psychedelics playing out the same way cannabis has? Do you see some similarities, some differences, or what are your thoughts on where we are now and where we might be headed to?
Yeah, I definitely see a lot of differences.
Hmm.
Where the similarities go is you know back in 2008, and we can go back to the California
Yeah.
legacy market, but let's just, speak to when we started adopting regulated legalizing medical cannabis. The train left the station and we learned a lot from cannabis. Cannabis,
Yeah.
having said that, is a very different drug than the classical psychedelics, even MDMA. So I don't think that we're going to see the same journey in psychedelics that we did in cannabis because of the risk and the dosing issues.
Right.
I think we will see it run the line of pharmacies a little more. I think that if churches and the indigenous and some of these peripheral professionals, therapists, for example, and I don't mean they're peripheral in a sense that they're less. I mean, let's say they're not MDs or medical doctors or psychiatrists. We are going to see that opening up a little bit. But here's what we need to talk about, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We have we all have great access to these drugs. These drugs are not hidden away, hard to get. So once you have opened the door to accessing these things, they're there. My biggest concern is that as we navigate this space, it gets rolled up into pharmacy. We're about to see maybe Monday cannabis moved from Schedule 1. So Schedule 1 means it has no health benefits and it's going to kill you. It's there with fentanyl and
Yep.
heroin. That's where we put cannabis. So when we see if our fearless leader moves it to Schedule 3, which he is motioning will happen, we're going to see on the good side of that, we're going to see that dispensary owners aren't subject to a tax code designed for Al Capone called 280E. That means no standard deductions. So when we see that alleviated, that 25% net profits that you currently send to the federal government are going to be back into the coffers of cannabis owners. The negative side of this story, when it goes on to Schedule 3, it's going to sit fully under the purview of the FDA. I'm not thrilled about that. That is dangerous in a lot of different ways. The DEA also sits in and takes a look. Where I'd like to see all this go is ATF. Why are we
Mm.
not putting cannabis, particularly into alongside alcohol and tobacco from a recreational standpoint? So if we overregulate this and we put it under some of these things, big money is always going to
Yeah.
take this. Big money is overrun cannabis now. Now it's little big money, multi-state operas, the $500 million club, these guys just pushing $1 billion. Those are very, very little players relative to pharmacy. So we'll see what happens. I don't think these two are going to be created equally. Cannabis and psychedelics, I think, are going to be bifurcated, in my opinion. And we'll see which regulatory body grabs hold and decides their fate. I hope it's decriminalized, but I'm not holding my breath. Let's look at what happened in Oregon, right?
Yeah.
In Oregon, they did what Portugal did. They decriminalized all drugs, but they had no regulatory backstop to catch it. Oregon's always been notoriously bad about governing their people. Never have they been good. And so to let that be the first to fly in Oregon, they've already pulled it back. So now with psilocybin, with magic mushrooms, you could be in Tillamook, you can be in one county and have it be legal and be in another county and have it not. As a consumer, you have no idea which is which. We don't want that either. So we'll see what happens. I don't have a lot of faith in government. As a rule. So
Right.
my instinct is that it could go very wrong here instead of well, unfortunately.
Yeah. Time will tell for
Time
sure.
will tell.
Sure.
Yes.
We got a girl coming from Oakland. Shout out to Oakland. Aisha, what's cracking? She says, "What did you have to unlearn about femininity leadership, and success to build companies that actually heal rather than extract?
What did I have to unlearn? That's such a good question. I'm very lucky growing up, being from so many
Mhm.
kids, and my
Yeah.
father was a failed entrepreneur across I mean, he put all of his energy into us kids, I would say. But what got a lot of sun in my face there. Well, I don't know that I had to unlearn as much as some. I have been, um, I, I haven't had a lot of fear around taking entrepreneurial risk. And that doesn't mean I haven't failed, because I have so failed in my time. But I think I've also understood that I've never chased money. I've never, ever, ever chased money. It's always been about solving the problem, and the sort of the high that comes with building something. Where I've had advantage, I think, is that I am not afraid of my femininity. So I manage and I build companies in my authentic female self. So that means I operate different than men do. Um, that's a gross generalization. Just as I said it, I want to pull it back. But there's something very feminine about how we run a household. By extension, the way we can run companies is empowering others. We empower our kids. We want them to be the best they can be. We want to give them all the tools. Well, the same when you build a team of employees. I'm not the plumber, the accountant, the lawyer. There are people that are way smarter than me when I build companies. And what I've learned, and I'm hoping this is divine feminine, is that comes with empowering others to work as a team. I'll tell you something from a business structure that I am enamored by, and strive to build my ecosystem of companies around, are ESOPs. Now that's a tax situation, but what an ESOP does is it forms a big bubble around you so that you're not paying taxes, federal, state, city taxes, and instead all of your employees own that company, and they're the benefactors of those tax breaks. To me, if we can move to a space where we're including employees as part of the team and empowering them to do better, that's the win as
Yeah.
a female. And you have only to gain. We don't all need to be trillionaires. To me, that's a disgusting display of ego. I never need that much money. I mean, in fairness, you can easily blow through $1 million. I can attest to that. Money goes fast these days, but you don't necessarily need a billion. Can we cap it, George? At a
Yeah.
billion? Is there a cap for this nonsense?
There needs to be. There
I
needs to
think
be,
so.
without a doubt. There used to be. It used to be, you made a certain amount of money, you were taxed like 70%. And we were doing just fine. We were doing just fine
Right,
back then.
right.
So, Aisha, that's an awesome question. Sophia, my girl Sophia, coming in from Toronto. We're
Toronto.
multinational over here. Thank you, Sophia, for being here. She says you've moved fluidly between FinTech, MedTech, and now Sextech. Do you see these as separate industries or as one evolving ecosystem of human trust?
I see it more as one ecosystem for
Okay.
sure. And once you have navigated wireframing and development with developers on the MedTech or the FinTech or RegTech side, something like WeFlowYo is just another widget. So you're figuring out, um, essentially just how to build, in this case, tracking around that. So to me, they're kind of one and the same. And once you've experienced building one, you use that experience
Yeah.
and those tools to go build the next one. Gosh, great questions, guys.
Yeah. We're crushing. I have the best audience in the world. Thank you,
You
Sophia, for
kind
being
of
here.
do.
Well, I have the best guest too. I'm looking at one right
No
now. So thank you. Who else do I got coming in over here? I got Elena. What's cracking, Elena? She asks the question, in cultures where women's pleasure is still taboo. Elaine is coming from Mexico City. This makes more sense.
Nice.
In cultures where women's pleasure is still taboo, how do you build products and narratives that liberate without imposing? Nice question, Elena. Thanks for having the
Yeah,
courage to
such a
throw that
good
out there.
question. The way I do it is I push back on that shame and that
Right.
narrative, and I don't reshape it for a culture that is more inhibited. So I think that's how I would answer it. I
Yeah.
put it out there. I am obviously more careful if you got to read the
Right.
room. So if
Of
I'm
course.
speaking to an audience that is concerned, you reshape the narrative to some extent. But I do think even there's just the value in it's not shock for shock's sake, but just waking people up. There's so much noise out there
Yeah.
that it's hard to even get people's attention. So sometimes that shock value is warranted to get people to listen.
Yeah.
So I think I don't change based on my audience necessarily.
And I think there's a big difference between shock value and things that people are genuinely curious and worried about at the
Yeah,
same time. Like when you
right.
when you can bridge that gap right there, people perk up. You mentioned earlier in the conversation, people like, well, I want to hear this. Like, what
Mm.
is this about? Like, what are my preconceptions about this? Or it's a great point out there. Who else do I got over here? Liam. Liam says, what has entrepreneurship taught you about the relationship between risk, love, and trust?
Oh boy. Um, yeah. What gosh, your audience? What a great question. I think it's taught me that you can take risk and trust that the sky will not fall. So the
Mm,
more you push up against that risk and test it, and that goes with fear too, in my
yeah.
opinion. So whether it's risk or fear or starting a new company, um, the more you push at it, the less fear you have and the more trust that you have that you can accomplish those things. And if you fail, you still have not failed because you've learned that whole process on how to do it better the next time. So there is no failure in that risk. So trusting in yourself comes with the experience and practice of just doing it. So go do it, is I guess what I would say.
That's a fantastic answer. Fantastic.
It is.
Tanya, I'm bringing you right up here to the hour and a half mark. I feel like we're just kind of getting warmed up over here.
We
So we're going to have
are.
to
We need
do
a
more
volume
of these
too.
conversations. Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt, we'll make it happen. For the people that are listening right now, like let's say they want to reach out to yourself. Let's say they have some questions on some of the things you're
Yeah.
building or ideas that they want to run by. What's the best place to get a hold of you, to find you? What do you got coming up? What are you excited about?
Yeah. So, gosh, I mean, my social media, my brands are on all the social media, but I don't operate those as much. But I'm on LinkedIn. Boy, I'm showing my age, but follow my newsletter. I'm on Substack, YouTube. Like, follow Yes to Sex if you're interested. I'm pretty much an open book. I'll talk to you if you reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like, no sales calls, but if you
Right.
need my help, like mentorship, I am always there for other humans, but don't sell me stuff, please, because I wake up to like dozens of solicitations, and that's underestimating it for sure. But I am very available on LinkedIn. We're in dispensaries all over Illinois, in Missouri. We're coming in Nevada, Colorado, New Jersey, Oregon. I build dispensaries, so we have dispensaries in Illinois. And just come find me. We're doing sex talks. So I'm doing live, yes to sex, drugs, and flow talks where we'll kind of just open this up and let people ask some of the questions. So all that's coming. And then you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Ladies and gentlemen, go down, scan the QR code. If you're watching right now, that'll take you directly to her LinkedIn site, I believe. Go to the show notes, reach out to her, and be part of the counterculture. It's coming here, and reach out to Tanya. Tanya, hang on briefly afterwards. To everyone within the sound of my voice, from Liam, Nor, Camille, Priya, Jonas, Elena, Sophia, Aisha, Daniel, and my friend Maya. And of course, we got Caesar over
Maya.
there, Adam Butler. Thank you all so much for hanging out.
Marin. Let's go.
That's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha.
Aloha. George.